Most automation tools have a problem. Every workflow you build is standalone, and that means that past work doesn't make future work easier. This is exactly why I built an automation OS using Claude Code. This is a single system that allows me to build multiple automation without coding, using plain English, and where every single automation that I build makes the next one faster and easier to build. So today I'm going to show you the full system, how you can start using this yourself, and what are the things that make the system compound over time. So what makes this different from something like an N8N? You can think of N8N as a visual canvas where you see the workflow laid out in front of you, and you can see exactly how the data moves from one step to another. This is really powerful in terms of visibility, especially when you're getting started. But I feel like you can think of N8N more like a workshop where every single automation that you build it by hand, one automation at a time. And that is something that really works great if you have 2 or 3 automation and that's it. Meanwhile, the automation OS that we have over here is similar to a factory. So in this factory, you can design specific patterns. So by patterns, I mean, how do you connect the APIs? How do you handle error? How do you structure the automation so those are easy to debug? And those things needs to be figured out once, and then they are built into the system. And luckily for you, this part has already been done by me, and so you will receive the full system over here. Now, the beauty of all these patterns is that they compound with every single automation that you build. So if I build the first automation, it takes me a little bit of time, but then the 10th automation takes a fraction of that initial time. So I think it's enough explanation. Let me show you the actual system itself. Okay, so this is the automation OS. And by the way, you can have full access to the template within the AI workspace community, where we are focused on building AI workspaces like that for any part of a business, places where you can actually do huge part of your work, and you can find the first link in the description. With that said, let me show you how we can build an automation using this system. So the first thing that we can do is first off open Claude Code, and we can type a slash command that could be a spec creator. This means creating a spec means creating the actual document that will be used as the blueprint for creating the automation for the system. So what we can say is I would like to create a automation that is a webhook to Slack automation. So every time I receive a cold email, please analyze the cold email, make sure that the cold email is a positive cold email, and if that is positive, send a message to my Slack. So as you saw over here, I described the automation just in plain language. I can write this command directly, and then once I write this command, the system will go on and start creating the automation. Before creating the full automation and before creating everything, there could be instances where it would ask for more questions about the automation or different things like that. Here are a couple of questions that the system asks us. So, which client is the automation for? This is asked because the system right now is built for new clients. So over here we have multiple client folders, but keep in mind we can remove that and we can have this applied to a single client. So let's say that this is for my own use. Where do cold emails come from? So let's say smartlead.ai as a tool. And then what is positive criteria? Let's say that a person wants to schedule a call, and any positive reply, to be honest. So not a rejection of subscriber out of office. And then Slack message, what information should be included in the Slack message? What we can say is we can have the full email contact with the text sender details. So as you can see, the system is smart enough to ask you specific question on how you build something built out. And keep in mind we can go more in depth by specifying some specific things. So the document finished creating the spec, and let me show you the file that we have. It's a file like that will be used as the template for building the automation. So you can think of this document as the main, most important document for building the automation and making sure that the automation is correct. We will have a few different sessions. So we will have what is the goal of the automation. We will have a flow diagram so that you can also visualize what the automation would look like in your mind. API references, so what are the tools that we will use, what are the different steps that we will go through. So as you can see, initialize, extract email data, classify with AI, and then we will give you also the actual prompt that we will use. Format the message for Slack. So in this way, we'll format the message. Maybe we want the message formatted in a different way. And so what we can say is over here, we can mention something like, hey, I don't want you to mention the fire emoji and new positive lead into the formatting of the Slack, but instead mention something like, hey, you got a new positive lead, yeah, go rock, or something like that. So this was just a stupid example, but we can modify parts of the spec depending on what we want. And yeah, let's modify that. Okay, and another cool thing that also the system handles is edge cases and error handling. So in this way, the beauty of this is um, those are things that a developer would have to think into advance. Meanwhile, the system already thinks about that and thinks about what might be some specific problems that it would have for the automation. Other things, it will run some tests. It will have the scripts for the test that it could run. It will have the acceptance criteria. So that means what makes the automation valid for us. And those are all the different things that we have. The nodes on the implementation, tooling, what are the API keys that we will need, and all things like that. So this is the starting point. Now let's actually build the automation itself. And what we can do for the building is we can type slash build automation, and then we can reference this document over here. So we can copy the path of the document, and then we can link this document here, and the system will get started and will start building the automation. Okay, so the automation finished building. Over here, it went through two phases. One was the code phase, so building the actual code, and that's third one is the test phase. So it actually tested the code, and so at the end we have the automation itself, which is Python code that we can see over here. And by the way, I don't have to write this. I don't have to know what is present over here. I just need to make sure that the template that I'm creating over here for this classification document, this blueprint document, is good enough for the system to test. We have a webhook here, so we can test that out right now. And then it will mention what are the different files that the system created here. So new files, modified files, what are the test results. It will list out what are the environment variables that will be required, and environment variables here are what will be needed to add to the .env file to run the system. And so if we have a look here within the internal folder and we go into the automation, we will have this .env.example that we can check out. And as you can see, we will have a bunch of different information, and a couple of them which are important for us for our system are those ones that will be added. So we'll need to add those and create the actual .env file. So let me create the .env file, the main one, and then what I will do is I will add the API keys here and test the system out. Okay, so let's do a local test right now, and we can say something along the lines of taking the spec, obviously, and say something like, can we perform some local testing on this? So in this way, we can actually check whether the automation works or not prior to deploying that. So we'll wait a second. And yeah, all the context is directly within this file over here. So the system can check the file and understand the full context and understand whether also it's created or not, because we added the elements directly within the .md file. So the system went through and ran everything into dry mode. That means not actually sending the information directly through Slack, but performing everything. And so right now we can say run without dry mode to test this out. As you can see here, the format that we have is exactly the format that the automation created. So, hey, this sounds interesting. Are you available for a call? This is the AI analysis with the confidence itself. So this is all good. Right now it's time to take this and then deploy that. So what we can say is, okay, I think it's time to deploy all of that to Railway. Can we go through that? And so the deployment part is making sure that this kind of automation not only work within your computer, but work any single time that you build them. So in this case, we'll go through a bunch of stuff such as verifying whether Railway is installed. We will have a specific skill related to that, where we will have a argument related to the name of the client. So in this case, since the folder is called internal, we'll go through the internal. Uh, Checking whether Railway is present, whether we are logged in into Railway, checking whether we have a project that is linked to this specific um, client. In this case, we have a project that is already linked. So we can also check what are the actual variables. And keep in mind, once we get an error over here, such as right now, the system will self-correct itself and then will go on and see the variables for the text project, for example. And then finally, we will go directly into the deployment and create the deployment. And if we go within Railway, as you can see over here, we had a previous run which failed, but then we have deployment in progress, which is right now. And in a couple of seconds, this should finish deploying and add all the different stuff and be live. And now here, as you can see, the deployment was successful. Everything was passed. The service is live. We have a webhook URL. So we can say something along the lines of, okay, that's great. Can we test the webhook URL and can we test the automation from there? So like send some data to the webhook URL directly. And so we can see what is the result looking like and if everything works as expected. So in this way, before we tested the automation locally, right now we test that online, hosted, and so it will run through everything, and then we'll do a call to this endpoint and see what is the results that we get. So as you can see here, we send the post request to this webhook, and we'll send this message. So this is an example of a message that is being processed, and then what we can do is we can check the logs first, and then we can also check our Slack if the message was created. And yeah, as you can see over here, the message is created and everything was working as intended. Also, we'll test out a -1. So as you can see, you can do multiple tests here directly here without having to write any line of code. The system takes care of everything on that side. And here we can also check the logs for the negative to make sure that everything was working as expected. So you saw the full automation process here. We went through the planning without having to write a single line of code, just explaining what we wanted. The system did the coding itself, did the testing itself, did the deployment, and then on top of that, what we can do is we can create documentation, especially when it comes to sharing documents for the client. This is something that the system could take care full on. Now, there are a couple of nuggets in the system that I want to show you in this session, and this is especially related to how the system compounds over time. So there are a couple different functionalities. First off, what we have here is we have an API docs fetcher. So when we are working with automation, we are generally working with APIs, and we are working with different kind of APIs. One thing though is that over time, the amount of APIs that we are working with will be limited. We will be always working with an 80-20 of specific services. Services such as Airtable, Slack, SmartLead, ClickUp, those are example of that. So what we want to do is we want to take the API documentation of those services and then add that directly into our system here so that we can create scripts already created for those kind of activities that we can do. So to give you an example, if we have an actions that inserts a record within our table, what we can do is we can create some boilerplate so that this is always available, and this can be reused either across different automations or it can be reused across our own automation. So the API docs essentially allows us to get some documentation, and then once we get a documentation, we will get different documentation such as the ones that I have over here. So an example would be the open router documentation, and here it will explain like what is the full documentation, how to use the documentation principle and things like that, as well as what are all the different pages that are available. And as you can see, there are plenty of pages. This full documentation allows us to be used with another skill, which is an API boilerplate skill. Essentially, this skill takes all the documents that we had and then creates some boilerplate, such as an HTTP client wrapper, a Pydantic model, some CRUD operations, and then error handling for any kind of service that we have. So in this way, what we can do is we can reuse automation over time, and that is what makes the service compound and grow over time. One last thing that I want to show you that is included within this is a internal dashboard. So this will be the naming of the client. So this is something that I do for clients. So we have an internal dashboard. So here will be internal, and then we have a password. And within the internal, what we have is we have a dashboard of every kind of automation that was executed. So over here, you'll see the recent activities of all the different automations, for example. And what we can do here is we can view when this was initialized, which was the data that we got, how we transformed this data, and then the execution part. So this is a really useful addition to have to monitor all the different automation and monitor how they work. On top of that, what you have is you have the available automation. So you have what is the automation looking like, and then explain what are the actual available automation within the system, as well as documents, which right now weren't included for this specific automation that we created, but could be included in the future if you add those. So yeah, that's it when it comes to the full system. Hope I give you an overview of the full system. I'll allow you to try that out, and I'll allow you to work and see how you like this new method of working, where you don't have to go within N8N. You can just say what you want, and the system will help you build that. You'll need to have a little bit of technical knowledge, but the general knowledge about the concept is enough for you to get started and create and operate something like that. So if you want to have that, you can check the first link in the description. Once again, we will have way more of those going on in the future. Talk soon.